Hello and welcome to PM Express. And if you may recall, sometime last year, there was major news that ECG was up for sale. Indeed, there was a loan that was coming to Ghana, and as part of the loan, ECG was supposed to be. And all the English came up, liquidated, sold, PPP, name it, concessionaires, everything came up. And obviously, the workers got agitated, distrust. What then happens to us? Indeed, most of us who are pro-Ghana got quite upset. That can't we as a people also have something that is ours and manage it and make it work and make profit? Goil is doing it, Graphic is doing it. So what's happened to all these other industries? But I know it's technical, because ECG buys electricity, gives it to government, gives it to us. Government won't pay, and we will also, do our illegal connections. So by the time he goes back to pay for what he bought, he hasn't got enough money. And then the government will promise, don't worry, I'll sort you out. And so it's back and forth. And it gets to a place where the books of ECG is nothing to write home about. And so going forward, government thinks that, well, you know what, why don't we just offload all this burden to somebody, sit back, and whatever profits you make, give me some. The workers, the Public Utility Workers Union says, listen, I was working for the government. If now you're going to sell it off so that's going to be a private entity, pay me, and then I'll probably apply to go and work for the private entity or go away. Because nobody knows what's at the end of the tunnel. These guys may come in and say, look, there's too many of you, go home. I don't need 10 drivers, I only need 2. And that's the agitation on the table today. But are they right to agitate? Who knows? That's what the discussion is. My name is Nana Ansakwa IV, Chief of the famous Little Republic of Akwemo Dumasa, and your favorite TV show host. When I come back, we're finding out who's right and who's wrong. Well, thank you very much for staying with me in studio. Sat right next to me is Mohammed Afum, Administrative Officer for PUWU, which is the Public Utility Workers Union Secretariat. Mohammed, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And then our own PM Express resident labor consultant, Ben Arthur, who's also an engineer.
Yes.
Ben, you're welcome.
Thank you for having me, Nana.
You're welcome. Funny enough, even though Ben is an engineer, we only call him for labor consulting stuff. When it comes to engineering stuff, we don't call him. But I think very soon we have to start calling you consulting on engineering stuff. Let me start with Mohammed Afum. And question is, why don't we wait and see? I mean, what's happening?
Thank you, Nana. It's a very valid question, but we believe that we don't want to be taken by events. We know the fate of workers in public institutions which were divested some years back, and we do not want to suffer the same fate. I can tell you that in some of the institutions that were divested, workers' redundancy was delayed to a point that workers started dying one by one without having access what was legally due theirs. So we believe that since this arrangement is likely to lead to the termination of the employment relationship between our members who are workers of ECG and the company, there is a need for us to be engaged by the employer, as the labor law requires, that if an employer contemplates reorganization, restructuring, amalgamation, or any other, form of organization that results, in the termination of the employment relationship or result in the diminution of their conditions of service, the workers are entitled to be paid redundancy pay, as a compensation for unexpected loss of job. So this is our position, that right now our contract of employment is with ECG, not with any new company which is coming to take over. Now, if an arrangement will have to be put in place for the workers to move to the new company. Let the employer sit us down and then look at the issues involved before the handing over of UCG to the new company.
Have there been a stakeholder meeting? Maybe you are the unions, because most of the times you hear, oh, we met with the unions and we spoke, but when they went back, they wanted to, show a front that they sided with the people, so they didn't let them know what the issue was. So, have Ministry of Energy sat down with you to say, look, Mohammed, this is what's going to happen. They're going to come in, they're keeping everybody, or they are taking off 20% or something. Have you had that engagement?
Well, then, since this process started, we have made it known to the employer that there's a need for engagement with workers who are key stakeholders. One of the first engagement was with MIDA at Sogakope about 2 years ago. Then the then Ministry of Energy, Mr. Kwabena Donko, Dr. Kwabena Donko, Mr. Bujinapo engaged us. And the result of that engagement was that we were told that there were not going to be any job losses during the first 5 years of the thing. But meanwhile, that was what we were made to believe was contained in the request for proposals. Since then, we have not had any serious engagement. MIDA has formed a stakeholder committee on which we are represented. Nothing has happened. And then, during the course of our advocacy, an informal group called COSECA, a coalition of stakeholders for UCG coalition, met and submitted a paper to the Minister of Energy proposing that to address some of our concerns, or the concerns that premised our opposition to the concession, why doesn't the government enter into a joint venture with a new company that will be coming? So that when a joint venture comes, then we will know that the joint venture with UCG is such that we also are employees of that company, which is the result of the joint venture, and therefore the transition from UCG to the concessional arrangement will not be a problem, because we'll be carrying our conditions of service and the benefits that have accrued to us under the collective agreement to that company. That proposal was rejected. But what we heard from the Minister of Energy in a letter to COSECA was that the workers of UCG are going to be grandfathered into the new company. What it means, nobody knows. And that is why we are saying that, why don't you engage us so that we know the way forward? Because the law is there. And as the employer is obliged to comply with the requirements of the Labour Act regarding unexpected loss of job as a result of reorganization, amalgamation, restructuring, and that kind of things. And in fact, the law goes further to say that the employer must engage the worker to look at how the impact of the reorganization on the workers could be minimized. All these things have not been heard. We've written letters to the Ministry of Energy. Not a single one of them has been replied. So we believe that let us, agitate. That is our role. We agitate, we do propaganda, and then we negotiate. That's what we do to secure and protect the interests of our members.
Ben, being an Akan, I'd rather be grandmothered because we are matrilineal. Because if you grandfather me, you've taken me out of the family.
And your inheritance.
And my inheritance, everything is gone. So if you grandmother me into anything, yeah, I'm okay. But what does it mean? And where are we? What's this standoff? What do you see happening?
Well, I can foresee two key things. But first, let me just try and expatiate on what motivates the workers to do what they intend to do. The first is job security. No one wants to lose his or her job that he enjoys doing deliberately. So there is a sense of job insecurity. So there is a need for them to not just agitate, but look for mechanisms to ensure that their employment and related matters are duly protected. So that is one. Again, in fact, there is no group of workers who believe that the workplace or where they feed themselves from should collapse. So they are also showing concern and giving alternatives as to how ECG might survive without necessarily having to affect them on a large scale. So these are two major issues. Workers and employers always agree on one common ground, and that is the business flourishing and bringing profits. Where they disagree is how the profits must be distributed. So that is clear. But if we must have a way forward, my advice to the ECG board and the management and the ministry is that once you have workers at the workplace, gone were the days when we saw them as subordinates. They are partners at the workplace, and you have to open the channels of communication to engage them. I also understand whoever takes over ECG would definitely need some section of the ECG workers to make progress. So you would not want to shut that communication channel. So I advise the authorities that be to look for any avenue to engage the workers. It is better to engage them than to shut your doors to them. What if all of them unanimously decide to go on strike and not even to work with a new, partner or company that is taking over? No, that would be very disastrous for our advancement, our economy, and everything. So, in industrial peace, that is the way to go.
Number one, in terms of everybody's saying, look, we're walking away from this. If like the job market was good, then you have that bargaining chip. But now everyone knows that even if you are the manager and you go, you're not going to get anywhere to go. If you're the driver, you can forget it. So that gives the employer that hold. But could it be the case where the staff themselves know that, listen, we are overstaffed. There are too many drivers here. There are too many electricians here. There are too many. And that if you hand this business in to anybody, the job that 10 people are doing, they're going to squeeze it straight to 3 people should do it. And creating more agitation where the staff themselves know that, listen, there's too many of us in here. Could that be the case?
Yes, it could be. In fact, if in Ghana, in our practice, we have been following the LMC, Labor Management Corporation committees very well. There comes a time workers sometimes even agree that for the survival of the workplace or the company, we have agreed to pay cuts so that at the end of the day, work will go on and we do not have to lose our jobs. We have had instances where workers sometimes agree to forgo a month's pay or a cut to help the company. But in this case, it will be very difficult for unionized workers, public utility services workers, union, to come out and say that we know that we are overstaffed and therefore go and lay some off. No, that will not be the protection for their social and economic interests. And if union leaders can dare say that that ought to be the management position, I'm sure they will not win their next election. So that will not be the way to go. But if the union really wants to engage the employer and to have the way forward, the strategy to have at this point in time is to engage the employer in a collective bargaining, kind of system where as part of your terms and conditions of service, you agree as to when there's going to be a layoff, how your redundancy ought to be handled, if it will even be a case that will arise. So once you have all these conditionalities as part of your terms, you will not fear whether you are going to be laid off.
Voluntary layoff where you throw it to the staff that, listen, how many of you would just want a voluntary layoff? There may be some who are 2 years to retirement or 3 years to retirement, and for them, well, if you give me all that lump pay, I'll go.
Nana, it's inevitable in our case where a company is cited for inefficiency and in non-performance in certain areas, for which reason is being divested. So it stands to reason that whoever takes over will definitely do some movement here and there. Others will lose their position. Others need to be retrained. So job losses, diminution of pay, and the rest are likely to result. But the point here is that you ought to have an agreement even before it occurs. As we are talking technically, there has not been any redundancy. So if workers are agitating, the only thing they can ask for, which will be justified for them, is that we want us to have an agreement as to when or how, when such a situation arises, we should deal with it. That is the only avenue for workers now, because as I'm aware, if anybody is going to take over any other company, whether it's amalgamation or using a new technology or anything that affects the workers and their employment situation, you definitely ought, in the first place, must write to the chief labor officer. And the first option is not even to lay them off according to our labor law and best practices, is to look for alternative employment for them. If you're unable to do that, some of them can be retrained to fit into other societies and other sectors of the economy. So that is the first option that I think people who really want to protect their employment ought to look at those areas. That's the first option. However, if the employer or the new employer is unable to look for new avenues and say that, look, I don't even require your skills, which is also not in the best practice as far as our labor laws are concerned. If my degree or my skills have become obsolete, you cannot just lay me off. You have to train me and retrain me, which is also the obligation of an employer as far as our labor laws are concerned in this country. So I would advise my dear father and all those listening to us who fall in that category that, look, the situation for you to demand redundancy pay has not arisen, even though we can anticipate it. As of now, you can only negotiate that. Let us agree that when such a situation arises, this is the way we are going to deal with it. And once you have an agreement and the situation occurs, it means that you have had the agreement and the mechanism for dealing with it, and that is the way forward. Other than that, as he has rightly predicted, they will be taken by storm.
Mama, let me bring you in. So, I mean, would you rather go for that preemptive agreement that should it happen, or you know it will happen, and therefore, look, let's just go for let's just go for this package and sit and wait?
Well, Nana, you see, the Public Utility Workers Union and the workers of ECG are very responsible workers. They have the interest and survival of the company at heart. If you care to know, for the past 2 years, they have not had any salary increase during the power energy crisis. We understood the situation, and therefore, we've been decided not to press for wage opener sometime last year. So as compared to other, sister companies in this sector, we have made suggestions to the effect that, look, there are other means that the government can adopt to retool UCG. We are not in principle against the MCC Compact. No. What we are against is the PSP aspect, which that bringing in private participation in UCG, and even that we are saying that a joint venture will be the best option rather than to lease the whole assets to a private entity for 20 years. Now let me tell you a story about PUWU Dam. When Ghana started negotiating with the Chinese, originally the plan was to build, operate, and transfer. But when the Chinese came here, they were taken to Akosombo. They saw the dam, they saw the Ghanaian engineers, and they asked for how long they had operated the dam. It's about 50 years. It's, if you have the capacity to do this, then we won't come and build, stay here and operate and hand over. We are going to give you a loan to build the dam. And that's why it turned out to be what it is today. They built it and then gave it to us to operate and pay back the loan. Ghanaians, we believe, can operate easily, efficiently. But due to certain situations, it has not happened. And we cite political interference as one of them. But we believe that a joint venture could do. But this advocacy has not, has fallen on deaf ears. And therefore, if the owner of the company has decided that he's going to do A, B, C, D, we don't begrudge him. Because the labor law says that the employer has a right to hire and fire. And that is why we also believe that no employer, while we wish that we will work until we retire at 60, we are also not under any illusion that that is going to be the case every time. Unexpected introduction of technology and others, amalgamation, reorganization, takeover, can cause the unexpected loss of job. And therefore, when it comes, we will accept it. But then, what is due us must be paid to us.
Why has Ministry of Energy, not replied any of your letters?
Nana, well, we cannot answer this question, and that's why we are saying that, look, engage us.
Are you aware if they've received and acknowledged?
Oh, Nana, I believe that Ghana Civil Service is so efficient that when we send a letter there, there's a registry, it will be delivered. We have sent letters there ourselves. we have made informal contacts with certain people that these are some of the things that we want, but it has never happened. You know, on the 6th of October, the second BDS conference is going to be held, where that conference will lead to the selection of the entity that is going to have a leasehold over the ECG. Now, the RFP, that is the request for proposals, must contain aspects of labor. And that's why we are saying that, if this is what is so going to happen, and you have not engaged labor, and we also do not know the fate of workers in ECG, we will not sit down and allow them to be taken by events. We believe that let the employer do what the law requires them to do. Let us sit down and let us look at the nitty-gritties. What is the new company going to do? Is it going to accept part of the staff? Does he have the capacity to absorb all of it? If he cannot, what is going to be the next thing? So we are saying that we have negotiated a severance package. When the time comes, then it must apply if some jobs are going to be lost. And then, you know, by September 20...
Listen to the grapevine.
Yeah.
What do you suspect? 50% cut, 30% cut? What percentage do you think, you know, this new boy is coming? Because there's always...
Now, this is sheer speculation. And that's why we are saying that, right now, we don't have anything to do with the new person coming. Our employer is a UCG, and that's the government. Engage us. Let us know what is going to happen. We have been told that, for the next 5 years, there are not going to be job losses. That is a mere statement. Is it going to be part of the lease and assignment agreement, or is just a statement by the minister or by government? Let us sit down, look at it, so that at the end of it, if a new company is taking over, the lease and assignment agreement should incorporate some of our concerns about the future of the workers. Are we going, the transition period, are we going to go with our collective agreement in which we have negotiated our redundancy package? You know, are we going to go with the collective which looks at various means of terminating or dismissing workers? You know, and that collective agreement, as far as we are concerned, embedded in it are accrued rights, you know, under the act. So are they going to be just pushed aside because a new company is taking over? So let us sit down and iron all these things and put them in the lease and assignment agreement, so that when the new entity takes over, we know the position of the workers. This is all that we are looking for. I
want to take a quick break, and then when I come back, I'm sure Ben would want to add his pitch to that. Don't go. Well, PUWU protest, basically, as Ben will say, they are fighting for their job security. Just before the break, you were going to come in.
Yes, you know, let me, without begrudging my senior colleague, there are two perspectives to the issue as to whether the sale even makes sense or not. There are those who believe that for protecting employment and experimenting to survive on our own, it's good to have ECG in the hands of Ghanaians. But let me give you a very sad example from where I come from. Despite the fact that other parts of the country do not experience light-off, in Namampong municipality, for example, we have our own doomsday, even when the doomsday nationally has been solved. So those of us from that part of the country, as soon as you ring a bell that ECG is going to be sold and it's going to be more efficient, I am telling you, we can pour out to the street and celebrate for that. So it is imperative that we have had years of, you know, inefficiency for quite some time. And sometimes I personally ask myself, yes, we have been in charge. Can't we do it all these years? It's very sad to note that there are areas that people don't go to go and collect revenue, bills. There are times that ECG meters go far ahead of the collection, group. And for many years, people consume electricity and they don't pay. There are others who are consuming it, they ought to pay, they are not paying. And the point is that, what is management doing about it? So all these things are very key issues that we need to balance, with the need of job creation and the rest. But if I should land on this note for you to ask me further questions, I empathize with the workers. And the way forward with the workers and management is that whatever the situation, yes, you have written letters, there have not been responses, But these are the old methods. You are at the workplace with your management. You are at the workplace and you're able to have access to the board, engage them. Sometimes it might even mean walking to their offices unannounced. I must also sound this note of caution to the employer that never underrate the force of coalition of employees. Because if let me give you a typical example in Tamale, some years back when a nurse was slapped by a patient. You remember, all the health workers went on strike and people lost their lives for a patient slapping one nurse. And we do not have to play with this issue and say that, yes, they are workers. We are the management. We are the owners of the company. We hire them, and therefore we want to listen to them or we don't want to listen to them. My fear is that if they're able to congregate themselves very well, we may experience power shortages. You know, when we talk about people going on strike, they go in all manner of forms. And I don't want that to happen to our country. When I say all manner of forms, they can go to work, but they can agree to sit down and not to supply us with adequate energy. That is one way of demonstrating their, disagreement.
Let me come in here. I'm going to roll a video, and I've complained and complained and complained about it. So I'm happy that Mohammed here, and this is directly under Afienya ECG. And when I called to complain, they gave me a barrage of abuse. They literally gave it to me, honestly. And I told the gentleman, you don't know who's calling. I'm on the phone. I could be anybody. So it's just your duty to be polite. And when he rose, there's the burst fuel tanks at the PUWU barrier. People are building illegal container units. The district has put remove by dates.
I used to stay there some years back.
And
so I'm very much aware of that.
And ECG is putting meters on this thing. So I called to say, listen, you know, I've seen this before. Let's see on the screen. And then I explain to you as he rolls. Okay, so that's the burst. So that's the fuel tank. That's the PUWU barrier. The fuel tanks. This is where the famous 2 million, 3 million liters were mixed. And once upon a time, I used to live in Hemel Hempstead, and there was the Bansfield site. So it's literally like this, where they have their tank farm, where they saw, you know, highly combustible fuels. And so it's just there on the left. And as you drive along the road, according to EPA, there should be 100 meters before any inhabitants. And there you see this green structure there, you know, and even before the green structure, you see somebody's just mounted a little platform who's also going to build theirs there, even closer to it. And there's the famous red mark there, you know, saying remove by. All they have got removed by, and you can see they're all being connected to ECG. Yeah. So I rang to complain that this, you know, is a ticking bomb. And honestly, the insult, the rude, you know, and the next picture that will come on the screen is what happened in UK. This is what happened when he exploded. It was the most violent explosion since World War II. And the Bansfield oil explosion. So anybody listening can Google the Bansfield oil explosion. So it's because of this that I was ringing ECG to find out that, listen, I know we all break our rules and everything, but this one, I mean, this is the explosion. This is what happened. And I used to live in Hemel Hempstead. So this was, you know, if you only that the day it exploded, I'd gone to an elderly and didn't come back. So I wasn't in the area. And so for this reason, you know, as a, you know, dual patriotic citizen, called, honestly. So I had to explain to the PRO, ECG PRO, Boating, who was very apologetic, before later on Mr. Asari from the Afienya, I think he's the guy who heads the Afienya branch, also called to. But you know, do you have to know I'm Nana Nsakwao before you respond? So that's like you were saying. If I also hear that, well, if this is the case and they're going to give it to white people, then well, why not? Because I'm sure as soon as they come, all these things will be checked. because we've seen Vodafone and how they worked at it. So, you know, Mohammed, this is directly under Afienya ECG. It's a bomb waiting to happen. Look at it. And opposite it is a pork joint. Oh. Directly opposite it is a pork joint. All connected to ECG with
grid.
meters. They're connected to the grid. And I find it very shocking that, yeah, I mean, if it's somewhere in the bush, illegal connection, if I say nobody dies. But this one, so, you know, Mr. Mohammed, that's personally, that's my frustration. I used to fight, and I was against it. After this, I thought, you know what, I think we'll all be safer. And if we can manage our own affairs, at least we can live.
And you are right. But then, like we said, that we concede that it's not all perfect. I mean, there is no perfection in the world except, you know, God. We concede that part of our services have not been very satisfactory. And that is why we accept the fact that some sections of society have not been sympathetic to our advocacy against the leasing of ECG to a private entity. And I believe that these are some of the inefficiencies that management has seen, and as you spoke to Mr. Boateng, they are things that they will deal with.
No, they are not dealing with.
Yes.
I've sent him messages to say, look, you guys, and now they figure to move you. I've sent messages, as Mr. Asari told me he was going to check and come back. I've sent him messages, said, Charlie, you're not giving me any feedback. The guy who's in charge of meters is Timothy or something. Charlie, the guy was rude. And I mean, he gave it to me because the receptionist was rude to me. And so I begged them. When I got to him, I thought, well, since you were a senior manager, I was calling with one problem, but can I now complain that the receptionist has been rude to me? He was even worse.
Yeah, but
and still, they are all still there.
While I understand you, I also believe that it is not one or two of these things that should warrant this action being taken by a government because we are assessing this amount of money from the United States. I concede that it's unacceptable for this, but I believe that it is also not the reason, as we say now, and yet, you know, but these issues that we need to deal with. So I believe that these are genuine concerns, and management is taking, you know, action. And we have also, at a standing joint executive committee meeting, we draw management's attention to some of these things, and that is why when we talk about lack of collection of revenue, the introduction of prepaid meters has become the norm. Yeah. That right now, you just buy it. Nobody comes to your door to come and take this in. But again, sometimes, some of the challenges, political interference are mentioned. You have various types of meters which are even being supplied by politicians, and management cannot resist. What do you do about some of these things? So much as operational challenges are due, political interference is also a key factor that has also rendered aspects of ECG, you know, operations not very efficient. Again, looking at access to decision making, we have engaged management. But the point is that issue of severance or redundancy is not a matter that management of ECG can take. It is government that should take this matter because it's government that is going to pay the salary if the need arises.
Can I come in here? Sorry for interruption. Right. I think we have to put all these things in its proper perspective. It's a public corporation, but it's a limited liability company. And as far as our corporate laws are concerned, it's a limited liability company. So, yes, government owns it, but there's a board and there's management. And once you can attest to the fact that the management and the board cannot even take decisions as far as redundancy and issues are concerned, that is even the proof of inefficiency in the highest order. That's a proof of inefficiency. It means that they cannot even handle issues that is within their own domain, because this issue should not even go beyond the capacity of the board members. What would be the reason for putting them there and for taking allowances? What would be the reason for having a CEO and the rest? It's a limited liability company. And I always argue, sorry for taking a bit of your time, I have always argued that the time has come. Globalization is catching up on us, where government cannot continue to provide employment, you know, for people. Government ought to create the enabling environment. That is the number one, you know, responsibility of government across the world. And it is catching us on us. I'm sorry, it is catching up on us. Workers in this country must also believe, especially public sector employees, that the times for job for life is getting past, where you are hired probably at the age of 22 and you expect to exit when you turn 60. It's getting old-fashioned. I have to be pardoned for it, but that is the system. You know, when you read ILO, you know, reports, that is the way forward. Government must create enabling environment, and we cannot reasonably conclude at this point in time that a mere takeover of ECG might result in massive job losses. Some may lose their jobs, but it could be that probably there will be a net increase in employment, because if they are going to introduce efficiency, more machinery and more coverage, it is only in Ghana that when you need power, you have to go and beg for them to come and supply you, and then you have to pay. You are selling something, I am in need of it. You are selling it, you need the money. I also need the commodity. But I'm coming to beg.
The Ghana Telecom.
I'm coming to
bribe, you had to know a minister, you know, connection, letters before they give you a SIM card.
Nana, if you look at the composition of our bill, that is another inefficiency at the highest level. One first thing is that how in Ghana that we want employment created, but we tax in industries. Industries pay much more for the electricity that we consume than the homes who are not, which are not producing anything. What is the use of light, going to bed, put it on, you know, I on my dress, it's good, I look good. But at the end of the day, the industries that will give us our lifelines, they are paying about twice how much, you know, we ought to pay. Elsewhere, industries are paying much less to encourage them, you know, to create jobs. Now we are complaining of jobs. But I don't think we have handled that ECG outfit very well. And if a private participation will bring efficiency and high performance, I think the workers should bear with us Ghanaians, you know, and let's see the way forward. But of course, I do not subscribe to the fact that anybody should lose his job or her job without any justifiable cause. And that is my advice to government, that it is obligatory for government, which is the employer in this case, because it owns all the shares in ECG, to ensure that the transition will be smooth.
Mohammed, maybe you're also, you know, covering up too much for the politicians. Maybe you are covering up too much, and that maybe if periodically you will put official statement out to say, look, we have taken this decision and it's because of Mr. A or Mr. B, because all these MDAs, you know, who are supposed to pay, you know, are not paying. And then you keep quiet. And, you know, supply this school, they won't pay. Supply this hospital, they won't pay. So if you keep quiet and it gets this bad, then, you know, we'll put the blame on you.
Oh, you see, this is boils down to political interference. Look, sometimes workers decide that to get the company, you know, to sustain the company, let us embark on revenue mobilization exercise. They receive instructions that, look, the minister says you don't put an end to these things. What do you do? What do you do, Nana? What do you do?
So why don't you leak it to the media?
Look at the MDAs, for instance. They have budgets for utilities. Why are they not paying you? And you want to go and disconnect, you can't disconnect. We do agree we can't disconnect some education institutions, you can't disconnect hospitals, you can't disconnect Bema camp, you can't disconnect police stations, and the debts keep on piling. Again, you import crude. Now during the transaction from, after selling from CD to dollar to repay, there are losses. That comes to UCG. And quite a number of things. You open letters of credit for either Asogli to buy crude oil for Asogli and others. What do you do? So sometimes, as you mentioned, that is a limited liability company. It is true, but when he sues them, it's a limited liability company. If it doesn't sue them, it is not. And you see direct government interference in this. So the issue of whether it's a limited is only on paper, but in reality, sometimes it doesn't work. There's a board there, all right. There's a management there, all right. But there are key decisions that are taken by the minister and government. But the point is that whether we like it or not, he's the shareholder. He's the shareholder. The board represents the shareholder. And because they can't be there, they have also appointed management to help. But eventually, some key decisions are taken by the shareholder, which is government. But all that we are saying is that we believe that the advocacy for halting the this particular model of private sector participation has ended because, well, the government has failed, has not listened to us, and is going ahead. That is okay. That is the right of the employer. But we are saying that the labor dimension must also be there.
Could you and your union have gotten up one day and said, listen, enough of political interference, come together and say, listen, you are killing this business with this? And we would have all, you know, joined in and said, yes, of course. They should stop.
Because we all want the best.
Look, you know, Anna, sometimes in extreme cases, what unions can do is to embark on strike action. But we,
which you are not allowed
the sector that we operate is the essential sector, essential service sector. We can't cut power.
So Nana, I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
Are you aware that there is NEDCO?
NEDCO is in the north.
Good. Yeah. It is also just like, you know, ECG does not cover the entire country.
Yeah.
It's Ashanti region and down south. And then NEDCO is up there. So my question is, it is ECG that has been affected. Why ECG? Why not NEDCO as well? It's a question I put to my senior colleague, that why ECG but not NEDCO as well? Because as far as public distribution of electricity is concerned, we have two companies. The ECG is for Ashanti region, Central region, Eastern, Greater Accra, and Volta region. NEDCO is for Brong-Ahafo, Northern, Upper East, Upper West. Why are we divesting ECG, but we have left NEDCO?
Yeah, the simple answer is that that place is not lucrative for the foreign investor. It's not lucrative. If ideally they wanted to take only Accra, Tema, and possibly Kumasi, not the rest of the country. And whether this foreign investor will come and invest in rural electrification, which we do as a matter of providing social service, but not to generate profit. Is a foreign investor coming to show interest in rural electrification? These are some of the key issues that we have raised during our advocacy. Well, the issue now that phase of advocacy has ended. We are saying that let us deal with the labor dimension. Let the minister engage, let the government engage us and see the way forward. Yeah, because you are the shareholder.
I wonder, Ben, let me bring you here. I mean, why would government engage?
In fact, to empathize with them once again, it will be suicidal for government not to engage them. Because it's their right as workers that once they can anticipate amalgamation or a takeover, which can result in redundancy or diminishing of their terms and conditions of service, you ought to engage them. And in fact, without workers preempting the employer must write to the chief labor officer and say that this is what we're going to do. And it must happen 3 months before the takeover. That's the position of the law. The idea here is that you do that so that if there is any disagreement, it can even go as far as National Labour Commission for it to be resolved. Then the people receive their redundancy before somebody takes over, because then we can have employers in this country who will just fold up one day and pack their bag and baggage and leave without paying whatever that is due the workers. After all, if there is redundancy, it is also expected that those who are going to be laid off are not just going to be entitled to the severance pay. Anything that has accrued to their benefits, for example, leave that has not been spent or that has not been, taken, it is to their benefit. If there is any allowances that had not been paid, it has to be paid. So it is better that government or ECG in this particular matter engages the workers. Refusal to engage the workers is very suicidal for its own survival. In fact, yes, analysis, feasibility, everything has been done. But if the new owner takes over and the workers are all going to say that, look, we are not going to work in the new firm, it will be very difficult for the new firm to operate. So it is very dangerous to say that we are not engaging workers. And if the authorities are listening to us, it is best to engage them, because ECG has considerable number of workers, and a day of power of 2 days, 3 days, because they will be demonstrating or they will be striking, will not be good for all of us.
But let me ask something. Yeah. The Minister of Energy wrote a letter to COSECA. The COSECA is a coalition of stakeholders in the ECG concession arrangement, indicating that it was a response to an earlier one that COSECA wrote to the minister. The minister responded indicating that there will be a series of meetings with staff to explain the grandfathering. This letter was dated 30th May 2017. As we speak, and as I've been saying, not a single meeting has been arranged with the workers to date. So we are at a loss as to why government has decided not to engage us to look at this. And we get scared because the date for the completion of the transaction should be September 2018. 2018. And we cannot wait. We can't wait.
You're well within your 3 months.
Yes, you are within. You see, I keep on coming in. Pardon me. Yeah. I'm saying that all that we are discussing is anticipatory. Yeah. It is anticipatory because the law says that 3 months, at least a minimum. It does not mean that you cannot begin to engage the employer in this discourse. It's very important that you do, long before the takeover, happens. It's good. But my advice is that continue to engage, because you have no alternative than to engage. But it's not a one-way affair.
It's the point. It's not a affair.
Yeah, it's not a one-way affair. It's a two-way affair. So
right.
Continue to engage.
This is the point.
That is the way forward. Use dialogue. And as far as these issues are concerned.
This is not an ordinary. The anticipated redundancy is not ordinary redundancy where a Ghanaian company decides that, look, I'm going to do A, B, C, D. It results in termination of a number of work. So when I write to chief officer,
it's scary because of your numbers, though, isn't it?
The issue is that apart from taking the decision, there are a series of actions that government will have to take in relation with in addition to the new company, certain actions and decisions that will have to be taken, and certain agreements that will have to be fulfilled as per the compact, so that eventually, when all these are complete, 2018 September, the transaction will have ended and the new company takes over. And we are saying that, look, as you take these measures, labor dimension is also a key aspect. Engage us, so that we know the way forward.
Anyway, maybe Mohammed, this will put your heart to word, but grandfathering exempt someone or something from a new law or regulation. Into bracket, smokers who worked here before the ban have been grandfathered. Synonyms: exempt, excused, make an exception of, forgive, grant immunity to, let off, release, exclude, exonerate, informal, let off the hook. Smokers who worked here before the ban have been grandfathered. So workers who worked at ECG before the takeover will be grandfathered, which means you are let off the hook.
Look, at a point in time in the US, it's a US terminology. At a point in time, it was even declared unconstitutional by the courts. This issue of grandfathering, and it doesn't apply to only industrial relations. It applies taxation, and other things. So it's an issue that is not easy to understand. That's all. Let us sit down, engage us, and the way forward will be there for all of us.
All too soon. That's what time will allow us. But it's a going conversation, and I will keep you updated as to what happens, as to whether they were grandfathered or grandmothered. But thank you very much for watching. Tomorrow we'll be back to do this all over again. And gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us, Nana. I think you're the traditional.